Thank you and Senator Johans for having this hearing. The last one we had was in 2012 when I occupied the seat that my colleague from Nebraska has. And before that, it was 10 years prior. 2002 was the last time the FCC was in front of the Appropriations Subcommittee. And I think you're one of the most important agencies of the federal government. I think the role that commissioners play is one of the most vital and valuable. And you have a lot to say about the future of our country, the future of its economy, the security of its people. And I'm delighted that you're here, and I'm delighted that Chairman Udall saw this as an important opportunity for us. And I also would like to thank you for the kindness that you've all three extended to me and my staff in numerous conversations, phone calls and conversations in the office about issues that we face. You all have been very generous, and you and your staff have been very accommodating to us and our issues. I care about a number of things that the FCC is involved in. One of my more recent efforts has been in innovation, entrepreneurship, startup companies. What the FCC does has a huge consequence upon the ability for us to grow our economy, put people to work, pursue the American dream. And Kansas is a very rural state. You have 3 members of this subcommittee who represent very rural places, and so it's been a focus of your conversation as well as ours. But I want to start with the Universal Service Reform Order of 2011 and ask just a couple of questions. The last time that a hearing like this occurred was with Chairman Janikowski, and mostly in response to my questions about the effects of that order on deployment of broadband by rural telephone companies and the problems that order created. What I heard about was the waiver process. In my view, that's an insufficient response. You have had a number of companies apply for waivers. I think maybe a handful have been granted. I don't know the magnitude of what those waivers, what they consisted of, what the waiver consisted of, but it's not a long-term solution to a problem created by the order. And what I see now, and in addition to that, you've made 6 or 7 adjustments. I think the 7th adjustment to the order dealt with delaying implementation of the model. Those things are good, and I appreciate that effort. I thank you for paying attention to this issue. But what's lacking now is a telephone company, a provider's ability to plan for the future. To tell somebody that they can apply for a waiver doesn't give them any ability to predict what the future is going to be and what investment should be made. The adjustments, while valuable, create some uncertainty. And I also realize that there is a bit of hypocrisy for a member of Congress to be lamenting about uncertainty when we create so much ourselves. But there is a real bottleneck that's occurred as a result of the unknowing, inability to know what the FCC is really going to do long-term with the order related to universal service reform. The former, Simon Wilkie, the former FCC chief economist, concluded that the regression analysis is reducing incentives for small companies to make capital expenditures. And we have seen a significant drop in investment in broadband and other technologies, and I think it's as a result of this order. And even I think the FCC has agreed that the data used for the QRA is inaccurate. And my question, having outlined that, is what is the long-term plan? What will the FCC be doing to change this dynamic that it has helped create with that order, that we can't predict what investment is now a wise investment because we don't know what our return is going to be? Is there a thought long-term as compared to minor adjustments over a long period of time?
Thank you, Senator. It's good to see you and speak to you again. We are in it for the long haul, sir. You mentioned the 7th, we're up to the 7th order on recon. That is because there has been ongoing engagement with carriers and those, those who support them to ensure that the pathway that we set to deploy more broadband or broadband-enabled networks to this nation, to put this fund on a budget to ensure that those gaps in terms of disparities as it relates to broadband are filled. We have been working constantly with providers to close this gap. we have made several modifications, which I voted for, and in terms of certainty, the rest of this year in 2014, as it relates to the quantile regression analysis, it is certain. We have frozen those benchmarks, and they're in place. And so for the intermediate time frame, there is certainty. So I want to assure you that the things that we have done, the things that we will continue to do, including getting rid of the cost for an application for waivers and the like, will continue, and we will continue to work towards ensuring that the goals and objectives that we all have, meaning getting modern networks, broadband-enabled networks to this nation, to ensure that we stay on a budget, to ensure that Americans would expect, that will always remain front of our mind. I want to also point out that in 1,094 study areas, there was either no change in terms of the amount of monies they will receive or bumps up. There are 127 service areas that, you are right, they have had some negative impact in terms of reimbursements. We are constantly working with those 127 study areas, those companies, to ensure that there is no degrading of service for the people that they serve. So I want to assure you that we're in constant contact to ensure that the changes that need to be made are positive and are in sync with our goals and objectives for a modern infrastructure.
I certainly want to hear from the other two commissioners, but I want to point out, while I think the things that the commission has done have been helpful, the point that the freeze is in place for a year, that's a positive, but it's only a partial positive, because the decisions that companies are making about expenditures, they're thinking in much longer terms than what this means to me for the next year. They want to know what their return is going to be year 2, 3, 5, 7, and 10. And so the inability to plan or predict, I think, is the damaging factor that reduces the investment. Commissioner Rosenworcel.
You make very good points, Senator. Up front, I want to say we're trying to crisscross this country with broadband. We don't want to leave any community in Kansas or elsewhere behind. I think the reform that happened before I got to the agency is good in many ways. Refocus the fund from voice telephony on broadband. That's the right thing to do. Put it on a budget. That's the right thing to do. But I'm going to one-up you on your certainty and talk about simplicity.
Okay.
I think it is easy in regulation to take the simple and make it complicated. It is harder to take the complicated and make it simple. But if we succeed in making our program more simple over time, we will send better signals to the market and we will see more investment. And I think as we move forward, we're going to have to figure out how to be simpler so that they have the certainty they need to invest.
Commissioner, I'll change my speech and remarks to simplicity and certainty, because you make it's a very valid point. Commissioner Pai, anything?
Sure, Senator, you put your finger on the basic problem that I've heard from carriers from Kansas all the way up to Alaska, which is that the decision whether and how to deploy broadband is a multi-year investment. It's not a one-year decision, it's a 5 to 20-year decision. But the problem is they can't have the kind of regulatory certainty they need to make that determination. So if you spent money in 2011, for example, the 2013 benchmarks apply to that investment, even though the benchmarks didn't even exist when you made the investment. So that's why when we adopted the 6th tweak to the Universal Service Fund order this past February, I made 2 specific proposals that I thought could mitigate that unpredictability and uncertainty. First, I proposed that we hold the QRA benchmarks constant for multiple years and then adjust it for line loss, because the fact is that a lot of rural carriers are seeing the number of telephone subscribers they have decrease while the number of broadband desiring subscribers have increased. Secondly, I propose that we phase in the QRA benchmarks so that if there's a substantial drop from year 1 to year 2, the FCC could simply average year 1 and year 2's benchmarks in order to mitigate some of the hit that some of these rural carriers would receive. Now, that's not an ideal solution, but those are 2 specific ways I think the Commission could reduce some of the unpredictability while still maintaining the overall budgetary framework of the Universal Service Fund that was adopted in 2011.
My time's expired. I have a few more comments at the next round. Thank you.
We'll come back.